Welcome to AgeLust, a podcast where we share uninhibited stories about aging, desire, and wisdom. We focus on quality of life issues like sex, hormones, and the messiness of getting older and anything and everything you might consider TMI. I'm your host, Jessica Badansky, a double board certified family nurse practitioner and menopause provider. I'm passionate about creating a community where we talk about embracing our gray hair, or even waxing it off down there, and how you're never too old to get an STI. And if you do, write me and we'll talk about it. While I am a medical professional, I am not your medical professional. Always consult with your healthcare team before making any changes. I want to tell you something about the guest I have for this episode, Anne-Marie Mcqueen. Anne-Marie was different than other people. She wasn't a provider. She wasn't necessarily a patient. She wasn't an influencer. She is a journalist. And she's been a journalist for over 30 years. She created Hot Flash Inc. The work that Anne-Marie has done has not only influenced my work professionally as a certified menopause provider, but has also influenced my health journey. She was the first person that I ever heard health anxiety. I think from that point on, I was ready to hear what she had to say. Anne-Marie launched Hot Flash Inc. in June 2020 to cover the latest clinical studies, treatments, products, guidance, and more via a weekly research letter. Hot Flash Inc. subscribers include some of the top CEOs, doctors, and other practitioners in the space. That includes me, alongside curious, open-minded women and other folks seeking to connect the dots and find their solution. She has now created a growing 20,000 plus global community crossing over 40 countries. And she's actually interviewed some of the biggest names in the menopause space. I'm going to urge you to do two things. The first is to like, subscribe, rate and review, AgeLust, of course. But the second thing that is so helpful is to join Hot Flash Inc. Sign up for her mailing list and her website, because Anne-Marie has created the Fix It Fast Perimenopause Checklist. 14 totally non-judgmental, evidence and experience-based things you can easily start doing now to feel better by the end of the week, if not tomorrow. This 4-page guide is going to give you so many ideas and so much help, and it doesn't even have to be if you're in menopause. This just shows you the work that she has put into understanding and exploring and studying this journey we call menopause. I hope you enjoyed the show. I want to say, and I'll say this again, if you have not signed up for Hot Flash Inc., the Substack, the email, then you are missing this amazing, I wish I had done it myself. Can you read that? The Fix It Fast Perimenopause Checklist. How fucking brilliant are you?
Thank you.
Yesterday I was at work at my 9 to 5, and of course I shouldn't say this out loud, and I'm going to say it. Sometimes I say inappropriate things, and they just burst out of me.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, he was kind of placed into a bad decision. And, knowing how the reproductive system works is just so vital to life. It is like reading is fundamental and know how, reproductive situations go. Here's the deal. This is AgeLust, and this is Anne-Marie Mcqueen with me, Jessica. I'm the host of this situation. And Anne-Marie Mcqueen is a journalist for over 30 years. And your focus has been, I'm looking at Anne-Marie right now, focus has been on perimenopause and menopause and hormones for some time now. But what I need you to know, Anne-Marie Mcqueen, is that you changed the way that I practice.
What? Tell me.
You changed the way that I practice. So when I think about this whole menopause space, which I believe is like a very tame version of like a Bravo show.
Mm-hmm.
It's like very like Housewives-y, you know, where you've got like the
Or
the
high school with shades
yeah,
of high school.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's all like bullshit. It's all, you know, you've got like these authorities who are bashing other people, one that is just so fucking grouchy all the time. And then it's like, if they're selling vitamins, don't listen to them. Don't buy. And I'm like, bitch, you're selling books and shoes.
Oh
anyway,
yeah,
but
everyone's selling something.
everyone's
And if they're not selling it yet, they're planning to, because you can't keep going like for free. Like that's just the way it goes. So I don't know. Those people I often find are projecting in a way. And I do not understand a lot of what's going on, but we can talk about it. So how did that change how you practice though?
So when I was in nursing school, I'd already had a degree, you know, a bachelor's. I was already a parent, 2 kids. I was in my late 30s. And when you're in nursing school, you go through this thing where you're not everyone, I'm sure. Other balanced people don't go through this, but me. Where you're learning about all of these diseases, and I'm thinking, I have this very rare pediatric disease. I must have it, right? And so when you started to talk about your health anxiety, I was like, that's the name for it. I have health anxiety. I absolutely have health anxiety. And when I started myself, apparently I was talking about menopause in 7th grade. Thank you, Sunny Gibbons, for reminding me of that. But when I was asked to start to learn about it in 2017, I was very reluctant. Like, it was horrible, but I started to do a deep dive. The health anxiety and how you changed my life was around, I don't even know what year. But the more I started to learn about menopause, and really Louise Newsome was an incredible help, Barbara Taylor, like diving into their information, as well as looking at like, you know, going and doing like research on like using some of the more traditional ways to now and, you know, to do research in menopause.org, which used to be North American Menopause Society. Point is, I started hormones for me because I had super health anxiety around heart disease, because on my father's side, people just dropped dead from it. Not out of the blue, but my grandmother did. I never met her. My father had like 100 different heart surgeries, eventually died. I thought, okay, health anxiety, how do I relieve that? What does the literature say? So that's the first way. Second way, you had, and I commented on this, you had those pharmacists that do compounding. That completely changed my mind, because if you listen to what they say at NAMS or menopause, or, you know, very traditional conventional medicine, you know, its compounding is horrible. Meanwhile, my mother used compounders forever until she was unable to get her progesterone around 2003, right? With the with the Women's Health Initiative. Then all of a sudden hormones stopped. She stopped using them because it was hard to get them, but she had used them the whole time. So in those ways, and I think also your work with saying, I don't know, we'll see how it goes. Finally, I want to say, and I'll say this again, if you have not signed up for Hot Flash Inc., the Substack, the email, then you are missing this amazing, I wish I had done it myself. Can you read that? The Fix It Fast Perimenopause Checklist. How fucking brilliant are you?
Thank you. I was just thinking I need to update that.
You can update it, but it's awesome. Anyway, how did you, what's the deal? What were you journalizing before? I don't know what you call that.
Journalizing. I love that.
Well, 30 years ago.
I don't know if I wanted to be an investigative journalist. I don't know. I wanted to cover a national political campaign, if not an American political campaign. Like, I had big aspirations, and I didn't really think about health and wellness and lifestyles, but when I was 27 and my mom was 53, she died of pancreatic cancer, and I, was devastated. She was a very awesome woman and also very unwell. Like, now that we know so much more, the fact that she got pancreatic cancer, isn't a mystery to me anymore, right? Like, she had so many health problems that I think relate back to probably childhood trauma that I didn't know about. Because for someone to have just so many, always strep throat, migraines, endometriosis, um, UTIs, kidney infections, like, and then she later got chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia. And I know she had trouble with weight in those years, never went on hormones when she had her hysterectomy. She had a hysterectomy in her sometime in her 40s, but probably should have gone on hormones, right? I can't remember all this, but I was at a time that I think it would be her early 40s. That was the treatment for the endometriosis. And then her weight problems started, and then her endometriosis, or her fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome started. And I know that there was insulin resistance probably going on there and prediabetes. And I know now that there's an on-ramp to disease, something that's helped my own health anxiety, right? Because we're sort of told, like, by newspaper headlines, that one day you're walking along and then the next, the worst happens. Yeah. So all that to say, I didn't realize that at the time, but it kind of shifted my focus, and I became much more interested in, I'd always been, like, I was an athlete when I was a teenager. I was a figure skater and I always worked out, but I became much more interested in what's going on here, but not in a way that I was like, okay, I'm going to do this, and I still wanted to be cover a political campaign. And I did do some of those things, but always along the way, I wrote a lot about about health, about the healthcare system, about science. And I think losing her at that age, I felt very aware of, like, another part of the world that science can't always explain. Although I feel that we're getting closer with the concept of, like, quantum mechanics and quantum physics, like, stuff is really coming together. So that's kind of what happened. And then over the years, I just became more and more focused on health and wellness. And then when I realized I was going through perimenopause in my late 40s, I just love content, and I love putting together content about things. And I just didn't see anyone doing it. The way I thought that I could do it, with the way I knew I could do it. And it was funny because it was at a time where I'd say, well, I'm just going to send out a newsletter. And people would say, well, what are you selling with your newsletter? Because anyone I ever asked was only talking about email marketing. And so that was really confusing for me, because I wasted a lot of time on people who were talking about email marketing. And I was talking about a newsletter that I would get subscriptions for. And then one of the things I think is so beautiful about the world is there's a kind of like a collective unconsciousness, because lo and behold, other people were doing this around the world. And then they developed mechanisms, like, I'm on Substack, but there's a whole bunch of other ones. Funny enough, I read a book last year called Content Inc. And I actually cried when I read it, because I'm like, this is the whole point of what I've been trying to do. So anyway, all of that to say, I don't think there's still anyone doing it. There's a few journalists that are writing a lot about menopause in larger publications. But, and I'm not trying to criticize anyone, but journalism has really turned into a much different thing than it was. I call myself a recovering journalist in a lot of ways, because I see the journalists, but they're kind of cheerleaders for certain things, right? Like, I'm not a cheerleader. I'm not a cheerleader for stuff. There's stuff I'll get excited about and talk about because I have new information about it. But I don't want to be the kind of person where they're like, well, Anne-Marie would say that. Like, Anne-Marie would show the latest study that, the latest observational study showing that hormone therapy prevents dementia, when there are other observational studies that make things a lot less clear. That's not who I am. And the more I learn about this, and I learn about science, and I learn about how things work, yeah, I just don't want anyone saying, like, well, you would say that. But that makes people kind of cranky.
Yeah. And you don't, like, there's nothing that you do. You're like, this is true and this could be true, or
Yeah.
this is not true, which I love. And the kind of transparency about your own journey. You did a post about heavy lifting, right? And
Yeah.
weightlifting, which is funny because like now that's the whole thing. So one
Yeah.
of the big name menopause people who has their New York Times blah 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 situation, and she's saying how her focus in the 80s was on being thin and now it's on being strong and all of that. And you came out, it's not in response to her or anything like that, but you were talking about heavy lifting and you were like, it does make some people bulky.
Oh, that is my hugest. Okay, one thing, Jessica, that I just can't handle, and I've been through menopause, so I feel like I've been through extra like awakening to stuff.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking about this morning when I went to hot yoga. I am so sick of people telling us we're not doing enough. We're not doing enough. I want to scream. This has been my entire life that I haven't been doing enough in the right way. You know, when that doctor was worried about being thin, she was thin. And I'm quite sure she was talking about how important it is to be thin. And I just can't deal with it. And I saw the reason I made that post was that I saw a podcast where this other big doctor, not in the menopause space, but just was saying, I'm so sick of hearing women say that they don't want to lift heavy weights because they'll get bulky. And it's like, well, I'm so sick of people telling me that I won't get bulky if I lift heavier weights. It's impossible when I have been lifting weights for a very long time. And I had a personal trainer when I was 35 and we were lifting heavy weights and I got in very good shape. And then one day I was in the mirror and there's nothing wrong with bulking up, like nothing.
Yeah.
But I looked in the mirror and I was wearing a black tank top and I said, oh my God, like I'm looking like a German weightlifter at the Olympics. And he was like, no, you're not. No, 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 no. And it was the first time someone had just like told me that what I saw in the mirror and what I felt in my body wasn't real. Now, I didn't look like a German weightlifter, but I didn't like how my body was looking. And I have the kind of sturdy, muscular body that does get. And over the years, I've tested trainers. I've interviewed a lot of trainers because I ran a health and wellness site in Dubai for 6 years. And I started to just test them. I used to test them about a lot of things. I test them about, are there any differences in women working out in their 40s? No, it's calories in, calories out. And I would test them about this. And people have the craziest explanations. And one trainer even came in on Instagram and said this to me, like, it's the word bulking up. That's like, I'm sure that's how you feel, but that's not what's actually happening. And then they explain to you that why. And so many people wrote on that post, this is me too. Like, so, and there was a really big influencer that I was talking to behind the scenes. And she said, she's had me thinking about it before that. Cause she said that she bulks up and maybe it's not bulking up like I'm on a stage covering myself in like brown oil and, like, no, but it's the way I feel. And this is just a larger extension of like, there are all these women walking around making things harder for other women in the name of helping other women. And I can't stand it.
Right. And the conversation should be like, you need resistance training for
Yeah.
bone health, period. So here's a funny thing, right? When I think about meat, I used to be a bodybuilder. I had 11.5-inch biceps. I had a 42-inch lat spread, right? So that means
I
like
don't
when I
even know
would
what that
like,
means, but
so
I
it's
think
like
it's
when I'm wearing a
impressive.
big shirt, but like these right here, when I would
Yeah.
like spread out, it was 42 inches around, down. I did
Good
375
on you.
leg press. That is how and I love being bulky.
Okay.
Like I love banging on the muscle.
Yep.
I don't want to be like, there was one time where I stopped bodybuilding and then it all will convert into mush, right? If you don't do things properly. So I had stopped bodybuilding and then I went back to the gym and my mother had a fit. Like we went to work out. She's like, I will not be a party to this. And she like stormed out because I was starting to get big. But it like there are certain body types that will be bulky. The thin doctor is not going to turn into a bodybuilder. I know a bodybuilder who is very slight, tiny person, and they compete and they win. They get medals, but they look more like fitness models than bodybuilders, right? And
Yeah.
like when I think of fitness models, they have muscle definition and but they're not, they don't look big and massive. So I think that you are 100% right. And there's but Pilates will make you strong too. And there's
Oh
like
my gosh, it will.
a deep strength that happens. So I really actually did appreciate that, and when we think about like hormones and we think about people taking testosterone, there are some of us who want testosterone, yeah, for the libido stuff and the bone strength, but they're also like, I am used to feeling really strong. And
Hmm.
where the guideline is like you should be able to carry 10 pounds over your head, right? To know that you've got decent strength, right? You should be able
Right.
to lift 10 pounds. Like for me, I'm the type of person who's like, if I can do 30, I'm like, I feel good.
Right.
I feel like I'm on point. If I can lift 30 over my head, like that feels right to this body. And
Yes.
there's got to be, everything is one size fits all. And I say the same thing all the time about guidelines. Guidelines are that. It's like for the majority of people, this is what works well. And
Yep.
for other people, this is, not. And I think you're talking about labs too, because that'll come up, or you'll talk to providers who are more holistic or integrative or functional. Oh, that's the other way how you changed my life,
Hmm.
because you introduced me inadvertently to Carmen, who
Yeah.
has the advanced practice, who's a smart provider who is so smart, and that introduced me to this other provider, Gina, who is like, it's just really, and that's, you're the center, you're
Oh,
the
you're so
connector
sweet.
to that.
Well, there's a
um
lot of gaps, Jessica. There's a lot of gaps, and there's a lot of people defending their positions. And I think, all we ever hear is these conversations about how people can't get hormone therapy and people can't get doctors and they can't get treatment. That's great. That's a great conversation. And I think we're addressing those things. But after that, there are a number of gaps and people defending their positions. And that's only hurting women. Like
yeah,
it is so different the kind of care you could have if you went to a naturopathic doctor, or you went to a nurse practitioner, or you went to a GP or a gynecologist. And all the people over here will say, this isn't a real doctor. This isn't. Meanwhile, these people are out in front and have been treating women successfully for a long time. Not all of
yeah,
them, but they're much more aware of the nuances in hormone therapy. Like I could go on and on about this. I've interviewed doctors who don't think of progesterone for any other reason other than to oppose estrogen. When women have hysterectomies, and we always hear about the power of estrogen alone, and when you don't need progesterone to offset estrogen if you've had a hysterectomy, if you don't have a uterus, because
right,
progesterone is traditionally used in traditional medicine only to prevent thickening of the uterine lining. And over here in the naturopathic world, progesterone is used for a whole bunch of things, and not just naturopathic world. Like Dr. Jerry Lynn Pryor is an endocrinologist, is at the forefront of this. Progesterone for hot flashes, progesterone for mood, for sleep. So I've talked to doctors who don't seem to have one clue that progesterone is good for anything but to oppose estrogen. And that's crazy because we have lots of progesterone in our body, and it's actually the receding progesterone that sort of kickstarts the
yeah,
chaos of perimenopause in addition to other things. So when I see those doctors, and I've interviewed some of those doctors, I'm reading some of those doctors' books, I'm getting to page 25 and nary a mention of progesterone. I'm like, this is not helping. This is not helping. This
yeah,
is really scary to me. And then I come along, and I this is the first time I haven't had the weight of an organization behind me, but I am profoundly irritating to people because there's a dissonance, right? I have a friend who's an ER doctor, and when I tell him some of the stuff that I tell him, I can see that he's pissed off at me, right? Like he's
yeah,
mad. And I know why he's mad, because I know the same feeling when someone tells me that I thought I knew something and I don't know it, or that there's new information or things have advanced. So anyway, that was a big rant, but 10, 20 years from now, we're going to be having a big different conversation. And you know how long it takes for information to get to your doctor's office, for your doctor to change their mind about something or even get the information.
yeah,
We're seeing that a lot with the fear that still lingers over estrogen, and how there's many cases where you can take estrogen if you've had cancer and that kind of thing. So it's
yeah,
just this defensive positions. I steer very clear of those people to talk to them, because I'm not interested anymore. Like I have gone after some of these big doctors and had some of them, but I'm not interested really, because I don't think that's helping us. I love that the message is getting out. I love that there's, this swell of information, but I I don't like when someone doesn't know what they don't know. When someone knows that they don't know what they don't know. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. And also it's like, that's not what the guidelines say. Well,
Yeah.
okay. But
Yeah.
I'm telling you that this person had a hard time like holding on to pregnancy, had miserable periods their whole life, never has, I'm thinking about one person in particular, hasn't slept in 30
Right.
years, right? Chances are, like, what's the big deal if we try a little progesterone?
Yeah. What is the big deal? I love like low. I
Don't
love
have
low and
hot
slow.
flashes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love low and slow for, for cannabis or like people that are experimenting with psychedelics. It's a really great way to on ramp to something. I don't know why. I personally see progesterone as a really nice low and slow on ramp, and it's like haram in the world of mainstream medicine. It's like estrogen, estrogen, estrogen all the time. But yeah, the guidelines are interesting because the Menopause Society guidelines in 2022 for alternative treatments were like a joke. Like they were actually, I felt like I was reading. I don't know what I was reading. It was like, and I can't remember it all off the top of my head, but
I know there's like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which
yeah,
that makes me want to punch somebody in the face
yeah,
because putting like a rubber band on my wrist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. There's more nuance to it, but putting a rubber band on my wrist every time I feel stressed or whatever it is, like whatever
yeah.
I'm trying to break that behavior for, when you said something really important about this whole concept of your mother and trauma that she went through. Like they're just coming around to the fact that the ACEs score, that adverse childhood experiences, plays into your menopause. So your ACEs score, they're saying, look, we're not saying that if you have a high ACEs score, you're going to have postpartum depression. But we've noticed that people with really severe postpartum depression have a high ACEs score. And they're also finding that with menopause too. I mean, all of this stuff is just, that's not a cognitive behavioral therapy thing. That's like, how do we deal with trauma? How do we clear it out? That's a Gabor Mate situation. Like, let's pull out the big guns and really like pull this trauma out and cleanse it out kind of situation.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I've been doing that in recent years to the max. I'm reading Kate Codrington's book right now. It's really, I love it, Second Spring, and it's just a really gentle like way to look at perimenopause. But she says, this stuff comes up in your 40s. Maybe if you've had children and you had postpartum, you're able to clear it, but it comes up, it's another chance because Second Spring is the way in Asia they'll describe menopause, right? And before that, there's other seasons. So you're working your way through the seasons of your life again. And that is the time that you're brought a chance to work through this again. It's like, these are the things that we can't necessarily touch and feel, even though science is showing it. And it will be hard for people to understand who haven't opened their mind to the fact that your body is really intelligent and it's talking to you and it's saying like, we need to work through this stuff. I feel scared about the current menopause conversation in another regard because I feel like it leaves this stuff completely out. It's a very physical conversation, and this is a bio, psycho, social, spiritual transition. And I just think you're robbing yourself of the chance to do all of the work. And I know it's a time of life when we're crunched, and I know it's a time of great grief and challenges and whatever, but if you just chip away at that work, there is a tremendous amount of relief on the other side. And, the conversation about like getting back to where you were, like, I don't want to go back to where I was. I was so unaware. I had a lot of pain from my childhood. And, I always say you didn't have to be chained to a radiator to have this stuff, even in a family, different kids have different parents basically, because I had parents, and then my brother 2 years later had different parents because we're different. And also that they say, there was a lot of shame in my life because I wasn't chained to a radiator. So why am I having all this? Well, I'm an extra sensitive person. I had my own challenges. And we know with these adverse childhood experiences, it doesn't matter. It could have been quite mild. It's the way you perceive it. Like Gabor Mate has done the greatest work on this. And a lot of times working through this stuff is like, it's somatic work. It's breath work. It's screaming. It's like throwing things. It's like all systems thing. It's journaling. It's like I've had CBT once when I was really struggling, Jessica. And look, I know it's an evidence-based form of therapy, but I was so upset when I left that office because I just wanted to talk about what was going on. And she kept saying, see, now we need to, and like, it felt cruel for someone who was in, my early 40s and I was in distress. I now know, like I get emotional thinking about it. I was in great distress and I didn't know what was wrong. And when I wandered in that office and I encountered someone who had like no ability or ability to talk to me or interest to talk to me and just wanted to do these workbooks and these different procedures. I think this is why this gets so much like vitriol online. I'm sure it worked very well for a friend of mine who had anxiety years ago, but that was a really upsetting time sitting there going like, this is not what I need.
Yeah. I also, if you come from a background, and I don't know if this is you, where you had no sense of validation of your feelings.
Yes,
right? And to go there and say, put a
there you
fucking
go.
rubber band on your wrist.
Yeah. Yes. Like, I guess that's why it was so hard, right? Because I didn't have that. And then it's just that again, you try, like, there's nothing worse than when it's so hard to find a therapist and you go and you have to go to your GP and you have to get referred. And then when you find someone who's not okay, it's like, oh, it's very hard. It's very, very hard. That was the second time that happened to me. And I have all the sympathy in the world for someone trying to do this because, I remember I went to another therapist. Now, this was an actual therapist, and this was a long time ago when I was grieving my mom, but I remember her saying like, we have to get you out enjoying the city. And I was like, I'm enjoying the city. That's a problem. So that's it. Thank you for telling me why I got so upset in that CBT office.
Oh, you're welcome.
I just thought it was one of those times in your life where you have a outsized reaction. And then this is one of the things I love about going through menopause too, because I'm looking back and these are just popping up all over the place, right? Yeah. Times you just thought you were a maniac.
Yeah. And
you weren't.
Like, oh, fuck. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Even your friends. I have a friend who like is, I don't drink. I haven't had a drink since I was 25, right? I come from a family of
no drinking. It's good.
Misusage. Like severe, like notorious in Chicago misuse of substances. So I have a friend who really was maybe about 5-6 years ago was really losing their shit. Like they would have a cocktail or some drinks and I was like, this is a fucking maniac. And I was like, but what I realized now that they're on the other side of they're postmenopausal, I was like, oh, that's what was going on, and as somebody who like goes through life sober, completely, it's a weird lens to see people through, but I can have kind of compassion and grace now to be like, oh, I put all of this judgment on them, but really they were going through this really challenging, deep transition. My reaction to my own, as I still am going through it, is different than theirs. The thing that just came to my mind too, that I think happens, or I've noticed with myself, everyone's like, I don't give any, no more fucks to give and all of that kind of stuff. But really, I wonder if it's like we come to face, especially those of us who have lost our parents, and I have still, thankfully, one parent who's around, but I remember my father and my mother at this age that I am now, very vital. Like, and I remember turning and looking at them, and all of a sudden, like everything changed. Like there was a slack in their jaw or something, and it's like, oh shit, they're old. And then to lose them, it made me, and also being past fit, like the I'm not gonna maybe. My plan is to make it 50 I'm 55 more years. Like I want to do the tricentennial, and then I'm like a couple more years and be done. Right? Like that's the plan. But chances are that may not happen the way the world is going.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there is this reckoning that happens that we say, oh, how have I abandoned myself?
Mm-hmm.
Where are all those times that I've gotten mad at these external people? And yes, they did fucked up shit, but I stayed,
Yeah.
right? Or I stayed, and that I was complicit in it,
Yeah.
and that could be with intimate partnerships, friendships, work, like so many different things. And so then we say, like, you know what? Like, it's not that I don't give, it's that I give so many fucks about me for the first time
Yes.
that I need to make better choices. And
Oh my God, nailing it. That is exactly it. And the worth. I don't know, it's coming from, I guess, doing work, but like for myself, I never have gotten married or had kids, and I would have loved to. And I have a lot of grief about that. But first, I didn't meet like a candidate, but I do believe you attract people who are at your energy. And I put up with a lot of stuff. I abandoned myself, and that has become impossible. As I started to pass through menopause, like after that transmenopausal year, the months after that, it's impossible. I cannot. It's, and so I don't know where that worth is coming from, because I never was able to be like that. Like I was just dating someone over Christmas, and then he did that thing where they're trying really, really hard, but then they're just like not, like a little bit less. And I would have, like, because of my particular psychology that I've worked through, I would like be trying to make it keep going. And I just like couldn't, like, I just wasn't. And I've tried to be like, I've tried to be the person who's ignored a text message my entire life. I've never been able to be that person. And now I am that person. And I think doing a lot of work, but I also, menopause has had a huge thing to do with it.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that in that menopause brain book, it's that like making space in the reformation of the brain and like what we have space and time for. But it's like absolutely not giving no fucks. It's about like giving all the fucks about me for maybe the first time for some of us.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm getting like choked up when you're talking about it, but we were so outwardly focused in so many ways and abandoning ourselves so much. And that's just one of the aspects that I feel like gets lost. And in the narrative, I don't have any more fucks, it is true. Like I started a new contract, my caring about like the things that would have driven me nuts 5-10 years ago, worrying about this and leaping in to fix that. Like that is, I don't care as much about that for sure. In the new job, it's like, I'm good. Like if this is going to work out, I'm not going to sit and obsess about an email or whatever. But there's just a lot of narratives in this menopause space, and this is one of them. And it's not helpful, because if you're a person who cares deeply and you're seeing this and you're like, I'm not feeling like that, then it's just really discombobulating, right? Like, I'm a really big fan, Jessica, I've been learning a lot about cryptocurrency and blockchain for the last 6 years.
You mentioned that. Yes.
Yeah. And so I don't know why, like I just wanted to, and it's been really hard, but I would challenge anyone to challenge themselves with something crazy and off the beaten path for them, because the feeling you get when it starts to come together and you understand it, and I understand like 5% of it, but in the crypto space, there are narratives, and the narratives are, okay, this bull run that's coming, they're AI, they're decentralized finance, they're layer 2, they're all these things that people won't understand. And I think that's interesting, because there's people who I seek wise counsel from that I trust in that space, and they're like, look, it's a narrative, but also you could make money from it, right? Because it's a realistic thing. Like investing in tokens that are for AI projects is real. There's also meme coins. That's a narrative. That's nothing. You're just like basically gambling. Narratives are fine in that space. If you have money, you can lose it. But when it comes to your health, it's not okay. No. Like it's not okay. And so that's why I get really crazy when I just hear these narratives that aren't true, because they're funneling people in directions where they don't necessarily need to go. So, one of the narratives right now is so bullish on hormone therapy. And that's great because people are getting hormone therapy, and we had the Women's Health Initiative and everything went sort of doolally and people weren't getting it, but the pendulum is swinging really quite far. And I worry about that. There's doctors saying, there's really popular doctors on social media saying that we need hormones because we used to all die at 50. Every woman died at 50. And now we're living longer and we don't have any hormones in our body. And that's just like the most simpleton explanation and wrong as can be. But there are popular doctors that are saying this and believe it. That doesn't make any sense. Like, what did all women died at 50, but all men lived? Like, women used to live long, or they lived short, and then the average age was 50. So that's just the kind of thing. If you're going on hormone therapy because you heard a doctor who sounds good saying that, that's not a good reason for you. You need to go in for your own reasons based on truth, or as close to it as you can find. And there's all sorts of shortages of hormone therapy. Like I'm the person who's like saying, like, maybe you don't need hormone therapy. Maybe you need progesterone. Maybe you do need hormone therapy. This is profoundly irritating to people because it is a narrative. But I'm seeing all sorts of people saying, I'm on my last patch. There's a worldwide shortage. There's a shortage in New Zealand. There's a shortage. Like, I personally think it's a good enough reason to just maybe hang out and not go on hormone therapy for a while, because you might not be able to get it. And like, everything's running out. My phone and my computer and like soon your electric car. So I don't know. This kind of thing isn't always popular, and I went off on a tangent. But it's just, is it a narrative? Does it line someone's pocket in a way? Because so many of these doctors are making really good money. The more famous they get, this public speaking circuit, private clinics, and just sort of, it's
Online.
all there.
All the online companies now
Yeah.
that you can get. There's, Winona, MIDI, Electra, Alloy.
It's great because you can get your care, but I always say, maybe don't get all your information from those companies, right? Because some of them are more responsible than others in the way they portray this. And I do know of some that will never tell you a poor result from hormone therapy, will never tell you about side effects. Like it's gotten to the point, what it concerns me, because I saw a doctor I respect who posted on social media about side effects of hormone therapy, common side effects of hormone therapy. And there were women in the comments that had such great dissonance to see side effects mentioned. I saw people saying, this is irresponsible. I saw a woman say, can you show me your scientific evidence for these? And it's like, scientific evidence? It comes straight from the manufacturer, I would think, and women who've experienced it. And that person's trying to sound like they're, like that's it. I've noticed it's great. People have more discerning, but that was not a good discerning. People in the comments were not happy that she was talking about side effects. This is not helpful either. My goodness. Like, side effects are real. And they happen with everything, including supplements, and even something you might decide to start. You might get a side effect from iced tea. Like, you just don't know what you're adding to your life, and ignoring and denying and not being able to talk about it. And some of these companies, their information that they're presenting online will never show you the other side of this. And I think this is damaging to women as well, because if you treat hormone therapy like a silver bullet and you're expecting for the magic to like come shooting out of the sky, you prescribed enough, right? Like that you have, it's a dance. It doesn't work for everyone. It works differently for everyone. It works great for some. Sometimes you need, right? Like,
yeah, even for me, like, I've changed. I'm going to give you a story. So I have, one of the benefits of having being an NP is that a lot of NPs, right? So when I started hormones, I started them. I talked to NP colleagues. I started hormones, and I started a patch, which was 0.05, which is right in the middle. And I started progesterone 100. It made me really sleepy. It took me a long time. I got on my stride. Then I started to feel like it wasn't really working. So I went up on the patch. little bit later, I started to feel super depressed. I'm talking about, I had already been on it for about 2 years, but super depressed. So depressed that it was scary, frightfully scary.
Oh, wow.
Frightfully scary. I went to a menopause provider who, in a hospital, teaching hospital, specialized in that, very known on the circuit, and said, look, this is what's going on. They said, well, let's put you on Prestique, right? Prestique is an antidepressant. I did not feel good about that. I put myself on SAMe. Please do not take this advice. Don't do what I'm doing, but you might want to do what I'm doing. Okay. So, and then I talked to a psych NP friend of mine and somebody else, you know, 2 different people. One person who's an NP who's like I call her like the Chelsea Handler of NPs, because she'll try anything. She's like, yeah, do it. It's great. It's all great. And then I have the psych NP was like, it's hard to get off of that medication. So I said, I'm not going to do an antidepressant. I said, well, maybe if I up my estrogen, that'll do it. So I upped my estrogen to 0.1, which is the highest patch you can get. And what happened is that the depression went away within a week. It was awesome, incredible. I felt wonderful. A couple months later, I was exhausted at 3 p.m. Exhausted to the point where I felt like I could not function. At 3 p.m., it made me feel like I had been, like when I was pregnant, like I could not function. And I decided to do labs. Now, you know, labs are a big deal in like the Menopause Society. It's good to do labs, like know what your cholesterol is, know what your thyroid is, know what this is, but you just need basic, right? And then we can add, we don't want to know about the hormones. Although if you're on hormones in England, you know, if you're on hormones, they will check the levels. I think they're a little more liberal with that.
Yep.
So I looked at my levels and I remembered, and I looked at something called ferritin. So I've always been borderline anemic to really anemic. To when I had my colonoscopy, the gastroenterologist said, I want to do an endoscopy too because you're slightly anemic. I was like still within normal range, but low normal. So I looked at something called ferritin, and this is actually Carmen, Gina, they're doing this whole functional thing. And the ferritin is how you store your iron. Now I lift weights every day. I was doing all the right things, meditating, eating well, drinking well. I don't do drugs. I don't drink alcohol. You know, sleep is shit. My sleep is shit, but that's not because I can't. It's like, that's me. Like I'm a toddler. I protest. I sleep protest, right? I'm working on it. But I lift heavy weights. I exercise. I do dance. I do Pilates. I lift heavy weights. I'm doing all the things, right?
Yeah.
Sex, all the things. And still this exhaustion. So my ferritin was 17. It should be at least 60 and 70 if you're, and higher if you're like an athlete. I'm not an athlete, but 17. So I started iron, and my testosterone, I had no testosterone, right? Everything else was like, okay. Point is, I started to take an iron supplement. Okay. Because foundational, right? Root cause foundational says like, let's sort those things out. And if you're anemic, you're going to feel depressed. If your vitamin D is low, you can maybe feel sadness. Like all of these things are exhaustion. For me, the, low ferritin, low iron stores can cause sadness, right? And also you can't function. Started to take it. Hemoplex, the best fucking product out there, and it's cheap. It's like $9.
Nice.
Right? Hemoplex, started taking it. I don't even take like the 3 pills. I just take one. Everything started to get better. Fast forward, I go and talk to, and I gave myself I lowered my patch, and I gave myself a little bit of testosterone to balance it out. I go back to my conventional menopause provider who says, you're not anemic. You don't need this. You don't need that. Everything is fine. You're all within normal. Like, And I said, well, all I can tell you is taking the iron, I feel better.
Yeah.
I'm increasing my protein. It allows me to take the pressure off because, that's my whole thing, right? Take the
Take the
pressure off so I
pressure
can
off.
eat more protein, so I can
Yeah.
drink more water because I can function, right? I want a little bit of testosterone and I want to cut my patch in half.
Yeah.
And I have no sadness, right?
Wow.
I have no sadness. So it's not like one thing, it fits all. And we cannot keep slapping hormones on, which is one of the person who's kind of running this group of functional people, is like, we cannot just slap hormones on everything. Like,
Yeah, but
oh,
that's the narrative, is that you can slap hormones. And even the people will make fun of people who test to that extent, right? That's another narrative, is like, if you have a doctor who says you need this extensive testing, you don't need that in perimenopause. And it's like, yeah, you don't need it to diagnose perimenopause. They always say that. It's like, no. No one's saying you need it to die. No one's using it for that. They're using it because you are still not feeling well in whatever way, and they're trying to get to the root cause. What is the problem with getting to the root cause?
And you say to the patients, listen, this is a snapshot of that moment of time. So if you're cycling, where were you in your cycle? Are you on hormones? Like, what's going on? Like, what is happening? And the funny thing is that, like, my FSH and LH, right? So those are the hormones, like follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. So it's like saying, like, release the follicle. Okay, now crack it open, let the egg out. Like, I still have some. My numbers aren't super high. I'm still cycling. It's stupid. I want this shit over already. I'm done. I want this. I'm sick of it.
You can't rush it.
But I wouldn't know that. I wouldn't know that if I didn't run the labs.
Yeah.
Right? To say, like, wow, at least at this point in time, when I took it, at that snapshot, shit thinks that it can work.
Yeah. First of all, we have the ability to test, and yes, it's expensive. This is always the way to sort of denigrate, is like, sometimes this extra testing is expensive, but it's not like you're doing it all the time.
No.
And I also like how you you said you went down on your hormones. That's another sort of anti-narrative thing. A lot of people would be like, well, why, Jessica? Why would you go down on your hormones? I mean, there's cases out of the UK where women are on these like supra-physiological levels of hormones, and they're not great. And guiding bodies in the UK have come out and said you need actually to prescribe more progesterone. Yes, they raised the levels of progesterone that prescribers should prescribe, I believe, in directly responding to these private clinics that are prescribing too much estrogen, but not saying it. And then this is what's come out of the UK. What about in the US and the British Menopause Society? So that's just something you sort of, we suffered with losing our access to hormones and being told that they weren't good for us. And now it's like, slap on the hormones. And that's a pendulum that I believe has swung too far, because you do see comments. Social media is just a good barometer for this, where you see people saying, I've done this. I'm still trying to get my levels right. I'm still trying to get my levels right. I saw someone write on one of the popular doctors, like, it's been 2.5 years and I'm trying to get my levels right. I haven't found and they just said, like, you need higher doses. That the doctor literally wrote, you need higher doses. And it's like, 2.5 years, this person is not being helped. Like, I don't know that that's the answer. I don't know that that's the thing I would say to them. Like, 2.5 years is a long time.
Yeah. I would want to know, like, what else is going on? What else could it be? Could it be that you have no iron storage?
Maybe.
Could it be that you have no vitamin D? Could it be like you're not drinking enough water? I mean,
could it be that you have thyroid problems that you have undiagnosed thyroid, Hashimoto's, or low thyroid? I mean, these things are all, could you have gut issues that you don't know about? We have barely any research in the interplay between the gut and perimenopause. And that, I mean, for me, that was a huge thing that just blew open in the last couple of years, because I always had IBS. I mean, we bring, Jessica, everything we bring with us impacts our perimenopause. And so I came into this with IBS, just running through my life, always with diarrhea. I just thought that was normal. And I would be just, coffee, coffee, coffee. And then I'd go on vacation. I would be so tired. I remember thinking, I don't want to go to the pyramids. I'm so tired. Like I'd be trudging around some museum, just like dying of tiredness, thinking of when I could have a coffee. And then you do that for a couple decades, and whatever it is you've done, it's going to blow up. Right. And it takes more, I believe. And I think the evidence would show that it takes more. Like, I don't know that if you're having some of these problems, that hormone therapy is going to fix it.
Yeah. I don't believe that it will. I think it can help.
Yes.
But I think you have to know, you have to kind of start from the basics, if you're not like whatever, it's always like it maybe a touch will help you to make changes to start to investigate other things. But it shouldn't be that is the answer necessarily. I don't know, and I'm sure I'll get, people will not like that I'm saying, oh, who cares? Nobody knows who I am.
I don't care. I mean, the one thing that makes me nervous too lately is this correlation that people are seeing between people who had really severe hot flashes and night sweats and an indication of future cardiovascular disease. Like this is sort of like a signal or a sign. And I get really nervous when people have terrible hot flashes and night sweats and they go on hormone therapy and it's done and they're fine. And I haven't done a deep dive into this and the evidence or anything. Just common sense says to me, that makes me nervous. Like the hormone therapy could be giving you the protection you need to like mitigate that. Or wouldn't it be great to just check everything out and ask, why did you have such a hard time with hot flashes and night sweats that you were debilitated, as well as giving you hormone therapy so that you can live now, as well as the protective benefits of hormone therapy. Like these kinds of things, this is where the conversation is just so simplistic. I would want to know why all of a sudden I started having crazy hot flashes and night sweats beyond just my estrogen was dropping, or, like I just, I don't know. These are but I make everything too complicated. So,
but I think that's the difference between, wellness, right, and well care, as opposed to, it's Joan Price, who is in her late 70s. So I started all this because my real focus is I love the concept of talking to people about sex and aging about sex. And so she tells this story about this couple, and they broke up, and like one of her first signs of heart disease, she had this person, not Joan Price, but in the story, this woman ended up having a heart attack. She was postmenopausal, and all of a sudden, like within a day, like she stopped lubricating, period.
Right.
Like she stopped having vaginal lubrication and stopped having like any kind of sexual response. I'm not saying this story perfectly, but like in hindsight, that was her first sign that her circulation was not happening. Things were not okay. And it's like, hormones probably could have helped, right? But also, going to see a cardiologist and making sure and kind of, or doing a couple extra blood tests, for somebody who has maybe a family history of heart disease, that's super important, or the $75, $100 that it costs to have a cardiac calcium score done, is worth it to me to pay. Like you can put your pennies together, even if it takes you 6 months to put that together, to know that the next 6 months you will be supporting yourself in a really healthful way. I don't see the flaw. Like I get it.
But again, your vaginal health and this discussion that it's just simply the loss of hormones. There's so many other indications that it's a bigger question than that. I interviewed this awesome doctor, Bruce Webb, in Arizona, and he passed away. He was like my favorite. He was an OBGYN, and he's the one who first said to me so many times when I clear up women's gut health, their vaginas clear up too. Yeah. And it's like a lot of the problems go away and the lubrication comes back. And that's like, everyone needs to be on vaginal estrogen, but like, is vaginal estrogen going to address it if you've got these signals and signs in your body that you could be addressing now. But like, I don't know, these kinds of things, we all want a simple solution. Like life is complicated enough, but I really think, and I also think this time in menopause and perimenopause is created for us, like, so that we, like, because we're trying to figure out our own intuition. We're trying to grow and become the people we are always meant to be. I believe this is also part of the challenge, right? Like, not just saying, oh, okay, like I'm all sorted, and then ignoring the parts that aren't sorted or don't feel sorted. We've done that our whole lives. This is the time now to, like, and yeah, it takes a lot of time. It takes effort, and it's hard to find a doctor and then it's not the right doctor and get another doctor. But this is my problem with narratives. The narrative about vaginal estrogen is that vaginal estrogen will sort all these problems out and you don't have to worry anymore and you stay on it for the rest of your life. I don't know how many women know that these can be indications of other problems in your body. Yeah. It's the same as your oral health, right? Like, same as your oral health. If your gums are bleeding or you have sores, like, these are all signs. We're just one big tract.
Yeah, so. We are. And the body is going to tell you. I was listening to a Gabor Mate thing. I don't know what time we're at. Oh yeah, I do. 58 minutes. Okay, I won't keep you too much longer. I was listening to a Gabor Mate thing, and he was saying how he was talking about women, frigid women, not that way, but yeah, he was talking about frigidity of women in sex, and like how it's a freeze, it's a trauma response. It's like not, it's just so there's so many layers. Okay, this is what I want to ask you. Just because you brought it up, I want to ask you three things. The first one is, tell me what you think about menopause and money.
Oh, interesting. Well, I think, you mean my own beliefs about money?
Well, you've got some beliefs about money because if you're doing the cryptocurrency thing, and this is like your interest, and I also wonder because as we move through menopause, and like that's usually later in life, time is finite.
Yeah, I have big thoughts about this. So I came from a family where my dad always said you can't keep up with the Joneses, and I went to a school, high school with a rich cadre, and my friend and I always hoped that we would move over to their area of town, and my dad toyed with it. He never did, and there was some negativity in my house towards people who have money, although my dad did well. And my parents fought about money a lot. My mom was like irresponsible with money, and she would overdraw the account and she would spend. So there was, in my house, there was a lot of stuff about money, and I developed a terrible fear about money. I developed a terrible fear about basically everything. I just always felt like I was going to get in trouble. And even though I've done like really responsible things with money, like when I got my first journalism job making no money, I wandered in and got what we call in Canada RSPs. I put $25 every 2 weeks. That's equivalent, I think, of your IRA or whatever. I've done responsible things, but I never believed I could have money. Journalism is a career where you don't make much money. You're told that you're never going to make much money. I just never believed that I could have much money, and I wasn't responsible with it. And I just had incredible fear about it. And then because my mom died when she was 53, I think people who lose a parent young, they just don't see past that age. That's a pretty common thing that can happen. So to me, I just never saw past 53. And I always thought, well, I'm going to meet someone and he'll take care of it. And I just really always thought got mad that my friends had someone else that could take care of it. I've since learned that lots of times they don't take care of it in a very good way, right? Like when you farm out your financial wellness to a husband, it can be a disaster. I believe that you should always know what's going on with your money, with your family money. I believe you should educate yourself, and so I had financial advisors. I didn't know what was going on. I would feel sick if I had to meet them. I wouldn't look at my money. I would just if I got money, I would just shove it. Like I just had a very bad feeling about money. And then for some reason in the last couple of years, I'm like, this is bullshit. Like I'm fucking done with this. I'm done with being scared to look at my money. I've been lucky. Like I've gotten money in my life. I went to the Middle East. That was a big boon. So I've done a ton of work, like a ton. And I've had to learn to trust myself. And, what I realized over the years is if you figure out what's going on, more and more tools have come to help you invest on your own and to understand this stuff. And, a lot of times these financial advisors are just trading on fear, just the same way that people are doing in the menopause space. It's the same way they've been doing in all parts of our life, our whole lives. And the key is to figuring out and learning by myself, and the strength and like growth that has come from that. And that is from menopause. Like that is from my hormones changing. That is from me saying enough. That is from my, just the outward believing this financial advisor and trusting them, and then but not feeling ever good, I know what's going on with my own finances now. I have an independent consultant. I just went to meet him and I thought, gosh, I just feel so good when I go meet Henry. It's like I don't feel ill. like, so I don't know. That's probably more than you ever wanted to know, but I believe that if you just got your head in the sand and you don't understand what's going on, and you think someone else is taking care of it, and money is like energy, money is a tool. And, that's all it is. And if we have more money, there's nothing wrong with having money. If we have more money, we can help more people. If I'm making money from Hot Flash, I used to say Hot Flash is just like, oh, I'm not a businesswoman, whatever. If I'm making money from Hot Flash, then I can do more. I can get this information out, which I don't want to sound like a egotistical person, but I believe it needs to be out there. There's people with great resources selling other narratives. So yeah, I think it's huge. I think it's part of your transformation. I think the money piece is huge.
That's a hard piece for me.
Love that. It's hard. And believe me, I know I have been sick to my stomach about money. Like it's made me ill just thinking about investments and having enough money to be, I was always so scared of being like an old lady. I read a column once about a lady, a female writer, who saw a lady crossing the street and she dropped her bag and there was like dog food cans in it. And now I think the woman just had a dog. Like now that I think, how did this reporter, the columnist, know that she was eating the dog food? Like, I don't think that she I think it's a much more likely scenario that this lady had a dog at home and she was only getting the dog food. But that seeped into my brain. I think this columnist was completely projecting. Like, I wish I could go back in time and read this insane piece of, but anyway, that's like that when, that was my impression of what my life is going to be like now. And I had a come to Jesus moment a year ago. I went to Thailand. I was at Koh Samui, staying at like a really cheap, beautiful place. And I was in the water, like flipping out about my future, flipping out because all my friends are starting to retire. And that happens way sooner than you are ever ready for. And I have friends who are wealthy, like they're couples that haven't had this problem. They've been working together and buying properties and all sorts of stuff that's like hard and scary for me to do on my own. And so it was just all hitting me. And I was in the water and I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to live a long time, then I have time to get my shit together. If I'm going to live a short time, then it doesn't matter. And if I'm going to live a medium time, it doesn't matter. So none of it matters. And that's just the way I decided to approach it. And then I've been learning, like, I love the concept of exponential growth because since then it's like continued like faster and faster. And that's a huge part of my whatever transformation, I think, through menopause.
That's amazing.
Stick with it. Stick with it.
My little Robin Hood is like silly, but
a lot of women wouldn't even know how to do that. A lot of people wouldn't even have a clue. That's a whole topic.
Yeah, right. What is next for Hot Flash Inc.?
So I had like for 3.5 years, and I've always worked as well, right? Like I had another job, but I just was crazy, probably like in a way to get through this tumult of perimenopause myself and COVID and everything. I've just worked like crazy. I love it. Like I love nothing more, but it was getting really chaotic behind the scenes. One of the things I've realized, although I don't have an official diagnosis, is that I'm pretty ADHD-y. Like I have tremendous focus, but also my dad called me Ichabod Crane. Like I'll just go off in a whole bunch of directions. So behind the scenes, it was very, very unorganized, which was driving me crazy. And I read a book about the McDonald's brothers. And I guess they closed their business down for 3 months and then they retooled and reorganized and they came back and soared. And I thought, okay, that's what I need to do. But then my father died suddenly in February and I just got really knocked sideways. And I just wasn't sure if I was going to do it. I knew I was going to do it, but I didn't know how, right? And then I had a couple of companies come that wanted to sponsor the podcast. And so I'm going to bring everything back. in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to get going again because I can't imagine not doing it. And I've come so far, if that makes sense. So that's next, just getting that going. And then I really think I'll start looking at, I know everyone does courses, but I really think that there needs to be like a larger tool of some sort of what everything I've put together. Because what I see out there is really pretty one-sided. And I think people could really use sort of a glance at all the information so they can pick and choose. So, but first things first, I'm just going to get the podcast and the newsletter, which is on Substack, which is a community that you sign up on. It's not that hard. You just go there. You signed up for Substack, right? Like it's, yeah. So it's, if you've never been on it, you're like, wow, it's another new one. But anyway, that's just the place that does it for me easy. And I'll have a free one always on the weekend. And then I'll probably start a paid, deeper researched pieces that will come out during the week.
That's great. And then everyone should sign up on Hot Flash Inc. and get the Fix It Fast perimenopause checklist, because it is absolutely incredible. It's 14 steps and they are so good. They are just so good. They're so easy to do, and like the investment is, so maybe you buy Pignogenol. Okay.
No one talks about Pignogenol. It's such a good supplement.
Yeah.
It's neat. Yeah. I mean, that's for hot flashes. It's amazing.
It's so good. And, what I love is that when you look, each 14, you can't really see this, right? Because of the light. Oh, yeah. So this is like, gives you an explanation of why. So it's not just a list. It's so good. So everyone needs to sign up for Hot Flash Inc.
And Hot Flash Inc., just so you know, like that, it's not always like, here's the study that says it, although sometimes it is. Sometimes this is a practitioner who finds that this works. Because I based Hot Flash Inc. on scientific evidence, expert experience, and human experience, because I just feel like science can be used to discount so many things if it doesn't exist. And I think a lot of times science just the research just hasn't been done yet, or done to the extent that will satisfy. But there's so many things out there that people find. So I weighed it all together.
I did an IRB approved research study for my master's degree, and I didn't need, whatever. I did it. And the thing is that you have this expectation, and you can skew shit to make it look like.
Oh my God. Yes. This is like, who's paying for the study? Where are the findings? Did they shove them in the appendix and the footnotes? Because a lot of times shit that if someone's, first of all, I want everyone to know, if a company's paying for a study and you think those researchers aren't going to find something to say that the product, they'll find something to say that it works and skew it. It's very easily skewed. So that's thank you. That's one of the reasons. It's like, science is done by humans, and humans can manipulate it.
Even with me, to sit there and know that, like, in my gut, I still think I'm right. I still think my hypothesis is correct. I didn't ask it the right way. I didn't do this. I should have done it this type of study instead of, I should have done qualitative instead of quantitative, and da 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 da. And I didn't ask it the right way, and it was a bilingual study, and da da. But to sit there and be like, I have to, like, this is what came through, and it says I'm wrong. So
that's got to be really tough. Well, one of the things that disturbs me about the the dementia narrative in menopause is that a lot of the research in dementia and Alzheimer's is potentially flawed as well. Like there's been a situation over there with the, and people do research, and then they base research on top of that, and base research on top of that. And I'm just not sure about a lot of it. That's all.
Yeah. I think that there will be like a shift towards looking at people in their later years, like 70. Like, I think like just bringing it back to that whole progesterone thing, I think there are so many women in their 70s and 80s who would benefit from a little progesterone cream just to chill them the fuck out.
Yep.
It would be amazing. But what is the one thing that, if there is something that pops in your mind, that's the most surprising thing you've learned in this deep focus that you've done in hormonal change? Is there one thing that stands out for you?
There's a lot. It's hard to pick one, but I'm just going to say the number of people who don't seem to know the difference between progestin, the synthetic form of progesterone, and progesterone. I see people all the time talk about the hormonal coil and progesterone. I was just on a panel with someone who's got a whole organization about menopause and doesn't seem to understand that that's not progesterone. And I've had doctors on my podcast who don't seem to understand it. And this is super alarming, because if there are risks from hormone therapy, then they seem to be coming from the progestin, the synthetic progestin that's also in the birth control pill. And that is one of the biggest gaps. Like, come on, what are we talking about with certainty and confidence if you don't even really understand or appear to know the difference? It's crazy to me. This is when I'm like, I'm a journalist. Like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. But that's a very basic thing that I would want everyone to know.
Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to end with, or no?
Well, I just love knowing you. And we actually met in New York, and it was one of the greatest things a year ago. And I didn't even know that I was going to meet you. And I think you came with Rachel Hughes, who I love as well. And so anyway, you're just one of...
I strong-armed my way in there.
I love it. I love it. It's just one of the greatest gifts. I didn't think at all about the people I would connect with around the world. This, and not a group of really sort of deep thinkers and open-minded people who are happy to, no problem to be proven wrong or to discuss things in a rational way. Like, there's a whole other group of people that are doing this, and you're one of them. And I'm just so happy to know you.
Oh, I'm so happy to know you. All right. Anne-Marie Mcqueen is the Mcqueen of this whole menopause situation in my book.
Aw.
So everyone,
thank you.
I'm going to list all of your how to find you, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sure you learned a ton from that episode. Anne-Marie is not only an expert in journalism, menopause, but also apparently a finance expert. So maybe we'll talk about money another time. If you like the show, please rate, review, and if you're watching it on YouTube, hit the little bell to subscribe. Because the more you subscribe, rate, review, all those things, the more other people get the word out, and I can get feedback, and I can bring you other guests, ideas, topics that are important to this AgeLust process. And again, I want to remind you, sign up for Hot Flash Inc. Sign up for Anne-Marie's mailing list, listen to her podcast, read her newsletter. She's got a Substack. Thanks again. And until next time. If this podcast is helping you, please subscribe, rate us 5 stars, and leave a review. You can write in with questions at hello@agelust.co, and I'll answer them on the podcast. If you want clarity on your aging journey, you can book a private session with me on my website, agelust.co. That's AGELUST.co. We're on all the podcast platforms as well as YouTube and Instagram. Links are in the show notes.